Lunaverse, Episode 3, Helping Hands, Chapter 2, Don't Panic. Lyra visited as Trixie used her telekinesis to apply the black paint to Lyra's front and hind hooves. Ugh, it's cold, she noted before a thought occurred to her. And this washes off, right? Yes, Trixie said, waving a hoof as she worked the paint across Lyra's face now. I tested on myself, though the ritual says the paint will disappear anyway. Hold still, I have to get your horn, too. Lyra kept her mouth tightly closed as Trixie applied the paint across her horn, coating it completely. She had to fight hard against the instinct to immediately use magic to clean it off as Trixie finished, stepping away from Lyra. The unicorn was now painted, hoof to head, shoulder to dock, in black paint, made from several natural ingredients that Trixie had prepared the previous day. Thanks to Trixie's telekinesis, it had taken only a few minutes to apply it all. Only Lyra's mane and tail were uncovered by the paint at this point. It's, not a terrible look, Trixie said with a wry grin, grabbing a mirror from her kitchen's counter and showing Lyra herself. Very bold, anyway. Lyra stared at Trixie, hard. The clock on the wall read 11:57. Okay, time limit, I know, Trixie said, levitating the spell book over to her and looking it over. The spell they were casting was 3 pages long, most of it ingredients and how to prepare them, with the last being dedicated to the spell's magic words. Okay, most of this spell thing is just preparing everything. Paint, check. Magic circle? Trixie looked up from the book, glancing around at Lyra's hooves. The mint green unicorn was standing in a circle made from powdered coal, about 5 feet in diameter. Trixie examined it carefully, as did Lyra. No breaks? Check. Candles? I think the candles are supposed to be a little closer to the circle. Lyra eyed the tall candles. 5 of them arranged evenly around the circle, warily. They're close enough as is to the coal, thanks, she said. If they're too far and the spell fails, then the spell fails. Trixie sighed. Fine, she conceded, looking over the book again. Dust? Trixie hefted a bag of dust with her telekinesis, levitating it over Lyra's head. The musician let out an annoyed sigh as Trixie emptied it over her. Sprinkle of pure water. Trixie hefted a bowl and used her telekinesis, again, to splash water across Lyra's body, circling her as she did. And last, the magic words. That's a really weird concept, by the way, Lyra said. I mean, I know that sounds weird coming from me, but words can't hold magic on their own. They're mnemonics. When I do my spells through song, I'm really just using them to help me focus. The words themselves don't usually matter. Well, they matter to zebras, Trixie said as she finished circling Lyra, looking her in the eye. Okay, here goes. Trixie closed her eyes, focusing, as Lyra readied herself as well. Both their horns glowed slightly. According to the spellbook, this was the most important part. It wasn't simply enough to simply say the words. You had to believe in them. Nini awara miguo ni mabushi miguo mi kirata makana na tatoto miguo jonone webe. Trixie's eyes were closed, so she probably didn't notice the lights in the house dimming. But Lyra did. Her eyes widened as she channeled more magic into her horn. There was definitely something arcane happening here. As she focused to her eyes, she could see the magic taking shape around her. Strangely, despite Trixie's chanting in zebra, the magic didn't seem to be coming from her at all, but rather from the paint on her body, which was glowing blue now, and the circle of coal dust glowing green, and the candles, each of which took on a red aura. The auras seemed to reach out and collide with each other and around Lyra. Lyra was more than enough of an adult to admit that she was wrong. Apparently magic words did have power, and she had to admit that the zebra magic seemed to have power to spare. It was as though the spell, rather than taking or even touching Trixie's own magic, was pulled from the very air itself, and shaped by the words Trixie was speaking. Wewe ni binadamu, kote ba kwe migo ni miri. Wewe ni binadamu, koshike kila kwiwa mikino miri. You know, I am so glad that I spent 3 weeks reading Where Loyalties Lie. because it so helped me with this. She remembered after a moment that she was supposed to be observing and learning. Focusing, she tried to identify what the magic was actually doing. De- Definitely transmutation, Lyra observed. Despite the alien source, Zebra magic was definitely working along familiar lines as it moved across her body. But with elements of conjuration? Is this spell for two skulls? Is that even possible? Lyra never heard of a spell somehow being part of two schools at the same time. As Lyra understood magic, it was fairly rigid. Everything could be grouped into the 8 schools of magic. Then again, she knew that the schools of magic were, ultimately, created for convenience's sake, and had little to do with magic itself. Instead, having been named and organized by unicorn wizards long ago, it wasn't impossible for there to be magic that Lyra didn't recognize as being part of one of the 8 schools. But it was definitely a jarring experience. Wewe mi bidamo. Nico se yako wi na wazi. Wewe ni bidamo. Misume wiko mefu. Lyra wasn't certain she could observe much more. Magic positively flooded the air around her now, hurting her eyes and her horn to look at. She learned just all she could anyway, and so settled back, turning off her horn as it were, and waiting. The spell would take effect in a few moments, and she'd get to see what it was like as a zebra. She imagined it wouldn't be too different. Wewe ni bidamo. Wewe ni di bidamo. Wewe ni di bidamo. Lyra convulsed at that last word. She had a very distinct sense that what was happening should have been immensely painful. But thankfully, it wasn't. But that didn't change the fact that the magic in the room suddenly seemed to collapse into her, as though she had been a sinkhole for it. It began to shake her body around like it was a rag doll. That was when the first sickly wet crack split through the air. Lyra had just enough time to wonder if her neck had been snapped, when suddenly everything went black. Oh, Rainbow Double Dash, you clever turd! People, I've just done the research on what was just said and translated into Swahili. The first part of the poem was the space riddle. What has what has 4 legs in the morning, two legs in the afternoon, and 3 legs in the evening? Human. The sentence, Wewe ni bidamu, that translates into you are human. And some of these others go hold with 2 hands and stand with 2 feet. Your position is A-long. And also your skin is clear. This is what happens when you don't take classes in Swahili. So, Rainbow Double Dash, I applaud what you did. Brilliant. I don't know if you used Google Translate like I did for this spell, but nice one. Hearing was the first thing to return, and the sound of paper rustling and books being thrown in around and landing on the wooden floor. No, Trixie's voice said, clearly in panic mode. No, 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 no. Trixie? Lyra asked, as her eyes fluttered open, or she tried to ask anyway. She couldn't move her mouth, so all that came out was a muffled noise. Her eyes still worked, at least. She realized on opening that she was suspended on the air, held aloft by a blue glow, probably Trixie's magic, seeing as her horn was glowing brightly. The unicorn jumped at the sound of it, turning around and looking at Lyra, recoiling slightly as he did. Oh, the unicorn observed. At some point during her unconsciousness, Lyra apparently had been brought by Trixie into the unicorn's living room, where a steadily increasing pile of books had been growing all around her. The blue unicorn's eyes were wide, and she was shifting in place nervously for several seconds before looking up Lyra. Lyra, Trixie said in a slow, loud voice, as Lyra felt a telekinetic grip on her jaw listening. Can you understand me? Yeah, Lyra responded. Why would... The unicorn turned to see her pause for a moment, feeling around inside her mouth with her tongue. She hadn't expected such a small mouth, nor the disturbing number of sharp teeth. 4 in particular in front of the mouth. Why wouldn't I be able to... She continued after a moment. Also, ow, your pain. Trixie asked, eyes somehow widening more. Not really. I feel like I should be, though. But no, just weird. Trixie nodded. Weird, right. That's yes. Lyra blinked a few more times, moving her eyes around. She looked down the length of her, well, where her muzzle should have been. What's wrong with my face? Why can't I see my snout? I'm still breathing through my nose. Why is my nose so tightening? And she tried to lick the tip of it, but found only just the inside of the field of her vision. Pink? Trixie. Trixie wet her lips, then swallowed, and then wet them again, trying to buy time. Okay, she said. Okay, I want you to take this slowly, okay? Keep in mind that as bad as this was for you, I watched this happen, so it was pretty bad for me too. Trixie! Trixie swallowed again. Okay, I want to describe you to you. Take this in tiny steps, okay? So we prevent freakouts. We can't freak out right now. Freaking out would be bad. I'm pretty freaked out, Trixie. Okay, Trixie said. Okay, all in one go. Your coat is gone. You've just got this pinkish skin. You don't have a tail. Your hind feet now have no hooves and 5, I think the term is toes. Your hips are wider. Your front legs don't have feet at all. They have hands with 5 fingers on them, or 4.5. Your barrel has some kind of lumps. I don't know. They almost look like others. You have 2 of them. And your face is something I don't really want to describe. And you're about twice as long as you used to be from head to toe. Trixie looked Lyra over. Your front legs aren't nearly as long as your hind legs. I think you're bipedal now. Lyra blinked a few times, then let out a nervous chuckle, which made Trixie back away slightly. And you have a few sharp teeth, the blue unicorn added when she looked into Lyra's new mouth. Not all of them, but a few. This isn't funny, Trixie. Lyra nodded. No, Trixie agreed, before turning around, going back to her books. But it's fine. I just have to find out what you are now, and then... Trixie, let me down, Lyra demanded. Trixie turned wide-eyed. You don't want to see yourself. Trixie, put me down! The blue unicorn backed away at the force of Lyra's words. Okay. Lyra felt herself being lowered onto the floor, slowly, on her barreled stomach. It was then that she felt 2 lumps that Trixie had described earlier, on her barrel. Slowly, very slowly, Lyra began extending her forelegs into her field of vision, as Trixie watched, biting her lip. Lyra couldn't stop herself. She let out a low groan when she saw her foreleg and what had happened to it. It was just wrong! The forearm, the knee, the pastern, her fetlock, and her hooves. Trixie was right. They were just gone, replaced by things that looked like nothing so much as the front parts of a raccoon or squirrel. The fingers on them were trembling slightly. Lyra let out a gasp of surprise and shock when she found she could move them, as though it was an incredibly bizarre feeling to do so. Flex them in, bend them back out, one at a time, all at once. Lyra closed her eyes, taking in a deep breath. Discords, mismatched horns, Trixie, what in Tartarus did you do to me? I don't know, Trixie exclaimed. Everything was... Look! Trixie's horn glowed as he brought the spellbook over to Lyra. Look, I did everything right. I double-checked. I triple-checked. You saw too. Well, you better... Wait, how long was I out? Trixie blinked a few times, glancing to the walk on her wall. 5 minutes, she said. Lyra turned to look, and saw that it was indeed only 12:09. Taking the ritual's time into account, it probably had only been 5 minutes. Lyra tried to stand, but let out a slight yelp of pain as the unfamiliar shape of the limbs made her stumble and fall onto her side. She glared down at her treacherous hind legs, and immediately wished she hadn't. Among other things, she got her first look at the fleshy lumps on her barrel that Trixie had mentioned. They didn't look a thing like others, except insofar she was fairly certain that the pink points of them were probably teats. Further down, her hips were wider than they should have been, leading to long legs that ended in hoofless feet, instead of possessing only 5 small, useless toes. And her hind legs' shape, It was completely wrong. Her hocks somehow being inverted so her lower leg would bend backwards rather than forwards. "Trixie!" Lyra exclaimed, turning to face Trixie, forcing her forelegs and hind legs to work. She ended up on her hands in inverted hocks, knees now, she guessed, and glared at the blue unicorn. "This is not what a zebra looks like!" "I know! Will the counterspell even work?" "I don't know! Wait here, we'll try it." The unicorn dashed past Lyra, out of her living room and into her kitchen. Lyra closed her eyes again. "Transmutation," she reasoned, falling back onto what she learned in the Magic Academy. "This was a transmutation. A polymorph. It turned me into another creature. My consciousness remains separate. I am still Lyra, but my subconscious has been completely rewritten. I need to stop thinking about what I want my limbs to do. Stop thinking. Just do it." Lyra took a few deep breaths. "I want to sit down," she said aloud, then simply willed herself to sit. She didn't think about how her hind legs were bending wrong. She didn't think about how her forelegs couldn't be used for balance. She didn't think about trying to bend her spine the wrong way. She simply told her body to assume what was considered a natural sitting position, then sat. As it turned out, a sitting position for her body was sitting on her buttocks. Hind legs crossed in front of her, almost wrapped around herself, while her forelegs, or whatever they had become, were simply crossed over her barrel in her two bizarre udders. "Okay," Lyra said, breathing in and out steadily, slowly opening her eyes. "Okay. Keep calm, Lyra. Keep calm. Freaking out will not help. Freaking out will no—" Lyra had the misfortune of opening her eyes and seeing herself reflected in the glass door of Trixie's record cabinet. She recoiled in shock, falling backwards as she saw her face, now completely, utterly different. Her horn was gone, but that had been expected. Her muzzle was gone too, and her face had been flattened against her skull. Her nose now consisted of a protrusion sitting in the center of her face, over a pair of pinkish lips. Her chin had become utterly prominent. Her eyes remained gold, but had shrunk. They were maybe half the size they were before. Her mane, too, was identical, still the combination of white and mint green. A part of Lyra wondered if this was because it hadn't been covered in paint, but it no longer traveled down the entire back of her neck. That had soared considerably as well. Instead, stopping just at the base of her skull, and her ears, they had moved down as well, to either side of her head, and now were rounded and completely unable to move. Well, not quite. Lyra could found she could wiggle them a little, albeit pathetically. Slowly, Lyra crawled to her position, and against her better judgment, she smiled. And she saw the teeth. White and pearly, the teeth in front were basically the same, albeit much smaller, but she also saw she had sharp teeth that Trixie had mentioned, which she had already felt in her mouth. The 4 pointed ones, 2 on the top and 2 on the bottom. Lyra hadn't particularly done well in biology classes, but she knew for a fact that those were the teeth of a predator. "Trixie?" Lyra called. "Yes?" "You might want to hurry up." "I'm going as fast as I can." "It's just that I'm getting a little hungry." Trixie double, triple, and then quadruple checked everything, Lyra helping, though all the while glancing at the clock. By the time Trixie had set up everything, it was 12:17. Lyra was once again covered head to toe in black, cold paint, except for, once more, her mane. "Okay," Trixie said, looking back and forth from the book to Lyra in the magic circle. "Okay, circle of coal. Black paint, water, candles, dust, we got dust, right?" Lyra glanced at Trixie. "You just poured it on me," she exclaimed indignantly. Indeed, sticking to the paint that covered her body was a sizable amount of dust. Against her better judgment, as well, the candles were now exactly as close to the circle of coal powder that the ritual prescribed. "Dust! Okay, here goes. Kupateso kupigwa yako na kuchatako penme yako we ni panuma kuwa me tenata." Lyra, sitting cross-legged, with her forelegs crossing over her bow within a circle, found that she was tapping one finger on her arm as she waited. And waited. And Trixie... "That's it!" Trixie exclaimed, grabbing the book and looking over. That's all there is! Look on the bright side, Trixie. According to Google Translate, you just turned a zebra back into a buffalo again. On the, you should take pride on that. Is that all there is? There isn't a amazing page or something? No, Trixie exclaimed, holding the book up so Lyra could see. She once again found her body moving of its own accord, comfortably grabbing the book with both hands and reading. See? Page 112, then 113, then 114. They're all numbered, and half of 14 is empty because the spell ends there. It even says it ends there, so it's not like we're missing the last page. Lyra glanced up from the book. Then what did you do wrong? I didn't do anything wrong! What about those magic words? Did you pronounce them right? Yes! Trixie exclaimed and paused. I mean, probably. There's a phonetic guide. I practiced it over and over again. It has to be right. Trixie, I think the reader is the one who messed up reading those. Lyra flipped through the book. Not easy with fingers as opposed to a unicorn telekinesis. She found and returned to the original spell that was supposed to turn her to a zebra. Okay, she said. Okay, so something must have gone wrong here. It must have, right? That's why the counter spell isn't working, because you did something wrong. No, I didn't. You did something wrong, Trixie. Trixie visited. Maybe you did something wrong? How? I don't know. Maybe it's because you were using magic inside the circle. Maybe it didn't interact well with zebra magic. She stopped a hoof on the kitchen floor. Or maybe it's because you wouldn't have the candles closer to the circle. An extra 2 inches of space changes the spell from zebra to this! She waved a hand up and down her new body. And I was only examining the spell because you told me to! Trixie shook her mane, whickering and taking the book back into her telekinetic grasp, looking it over as Lyra looked at the clock on the wall, now reading 12:22. We need to do another counter spell, Trixie decided. The zebra magic eraser thing. Okay, get moving, Trixie, Lyra said, throwing her arms in the air. While she wasn't actively thinking about moving her body around, she was apparently very emotive with her gestures. I've still got a show to do! Trixie glanced up from the book, offering a pained smile. She intoned, looking a foal caught with her hooves in the cooking jar. Lyra's eyes widened at the expression, before narrowing to slits. What? I don't have all the ingredients for the other counter spell on hoof. What? I didn't think we'd need them, and I didn't even know where to find tickets and... Lyra pointed a hand at Trixie's door, a single finger on it extended. Fluttershy's, she said, and every pony in town knows that Fluttershy keeps chickens. She supplies the cakes with eggs for baking! Fluttershy paused. Fluttershy, I know the name. Lyra threw her hands in the air in exasperation. I don't believe... Fluttershy! Remember, I introduced you to Ditsy Doo so that way she could take you to the cottage? Trixie considered. Oh, she remembered. Oh, yeah, I remember her. Wait. How could that introvert sell anything to the cakes? I don't know! Lyra exclaimed, standing up fully for the first time since being forced into her new body. I think Rainbow Dash is involved some way. I don't care. Just get galloping there before I see how good I am at kicking now! Okay! Trixie exclaimed, holding up a front hoof defensively. Okay, you stay here. Keep reading that book. See if you can find out what went wrong. I'll be back with a chicken. Stay away from windows! Lyra sneezed. Without her coat of hair, and covered as she was in black paint, she was freezing. This? Lyra asked, before standing as best as she could with what was now small, confined spaces of residency, making her way forward and searching for Trixie's bathroom. This paint is coming off before I freeze! At first, Trixie galloped. She tried to think of what she could have gone wrong. She knew for a fact she had gotten everything right. She knew she wasn't the best at friendships, but even she knew better than to try out an unfamiliar spell of an alien system of magic on some pony without making sure everything was right. No, the only explanation she had was that Lyra's magical examination of the transmutation had somehow done something to the spell, and turned her into that giant, pink, misshapen monstrosity. Or, Trixie's subconscious pointed out, maybe it was your own telekinesis. Zebras don't have telekinesis. Maybe that interacted with the settle the spell. Then it's both our faults! Trixie exclaimed to no pony in particular as he galloped. Lyra used telekinesis too. Plus, that would mean that her examination had to have done something wrong, since it's not like zebras could do that either. But it didn't matter, because she could fix this. She had the general counterspell in the book. She just needed chickens. Lyra missing the 1 o'clock train to Canterlot was inevitable at this point. But there was the 3 o'clock. She arrived with plenty of time. She could fix this. There weren't many ponies on the street as Trixie galloped, due to having a mad alicorn trapped inside of it for 1,000 years. Most ponies sought shelter indoors during the noontime, wanting to get out from the point in the day when the sun was directly overhead and shone the brightest. Traditionally, one stayed indoors for a full hour, but necessity meant that some ponies nevertheless ventured outside sooner than that. But it did serve to spur Trixie on as she ran as fast as her hose would take her, trying to ignore the burning feeling in her lungs, the pain in her cannons and fetlocks as she ran from Ponyville, down the road that led toward the edge of the everfree forest and towards Fluttershy's cottage. She slowed down only when she spotted a mare walking along the road as well, a gray-coated, blonde-maned, wearing the blue uniform and cap of a male pony. "Trixie?" Dizzy asked. The unicorn skidded to a halt in front of Dizzy Doo, the element of kindness, male mare, and probably the only pony that Trixie ever made special effort to be nice to, for reasons she didn't even understand. "What's wrong?" Trixie tried to speak, but could only suck in air for a few moments. Unicorns were frail compared to the other 2 pony tribes to begin with, and Trixie, quite frankly, was used to a life of relative comfort and luxury in Canterlot. She waved off Dizzy's concern with one hoof, however. "Nothing!" The unicorn lied when she could speak. "Nothing. Everything's fine. Everything is in hoof. In hoof!" She emphasized that point when she remembered the hands and feet that Lyra's hose had become. "Fluttershy has chickens, right?" Dizzy stared, or at least turned her head slightly, so one of her eyes was looking at Trixie. The Pegasus was effective with Stormbombus, after all, meaning that even one of Dizzy's eyes focused on Trixie, the other was wandering, looking at the clouds overhead. "Trixie, you normally are better at lying than this." "Lying?" Trixie asked, eyes wide at the explanation. "What?" "Voo," Dizzy confirmed. Trixie was somewhat surprised that the male mare knew Prince, or even just a single Prince word, but then she had been full of surprises ever since Trixie had first met her. "All right, I'm lying," Trixie admitted, "but it's almost certainly nothing permanent as long as Fluttershy has chickens and I get them into Lyra in—" Beneath her hat, Trixie's horn glowed as she closed her eyes, performing a minor tell-telling cat trip. It failed, though, due to the mild panic that was gripping Trixie. "Soon!" "In soon?" Trixie echoed, a concern obviously mounting. "Yes, tickets! Fluttershy!" "What did you do to Lyra?" Trixie cursed herself for even mentioning Lyra, rather than just letting herself come across as being in some kind of vague panic over nothing. "Probably nothing, but I don't have time to explain it," Trixie half lied. "Unless Fluttershy doesn't have chickens. Then I guess I have time." Dizzy's concern peaked at that. "Yes, she has chickens." "Great!" Trixie said, getting off to set off again. "Wait!" Dizzy interrupted. "You'll probably need me to talk to Fluttershy if—" "See, that assumes I'm asking for permission, which I don't have time to do," Trixie said as she took off at a gallop, horn glowing as she cast her other favorite spell, turning herself invisible. To Dizzy, it looked as if some invisible eraser was slowly rubbing her out of existence. She paused, though, turning around, though Dizzy couldn't see her. "Don't worry!" Her voice, now with an obvious point of origin, called back, and lied once more. "All I need are a few chicken feathers!" What just happened is the canon version of Helping Hands. What follows next is the non-canon alternate universe version that was just released about a year ago. Enjoy. Lyra visited as Trixie used her telekinesis to apply the blank paint to Lyra's front and hind hooves. "It's cold," she noted before a thought occurred to her. "And this washes off, right?" Yes, Trixie said, waving a hoof as she worked the paint across Lyra's face now. I tested it on myself. And though the ritual says the paint will disappear anyway. Hold still. I've got to get your horn, too. Lyra kept her mouth tightly closed as Trixie applied the paint across her horn, coating it completely. She had to fight hard against the instinct to immediately use magic to clean it off, as Trixie had finished, stepping away from Lyra. The unicorn was now painted, hoof to head, shoulder to dock, in black paint, made from several ingredients that Trixie had prepared the previous day. Thanks to Trixie's telekinesis, it had only taken a few minutes to apply it all. Only Lyra's mane and tail were uncovered by the paint at this point. Not a terrible look, Trixie said with a wry grin, grabbing a mirror from her kitchen's counter and showing it to Lyra. Very bold, anyway. Lyra stared hard at Trixie. The clock at the wall read 11:57. Okay, time limit. I know, Trixie said, levitating the spell book over to her and looking it over. The spell they were casting was 3 pages long, mostly the ingredients and how to prepare them, with the last being dedicated to the spell's magic words. Okay, most of this spell thing is just preparing everything. Paint, check, magic circle. Trixie looked up from the book, glancing down at Lyra's hooves. The mint green unicorn was standing in a circle made from powdered coal, about 5 feet in diameter. Trixie examined it carefully, as did Lyra. No breaks? Check. Candles? I think candles are supposed to be a little closer to the circle. Lyra eyed the tall candles, 5 of them arranged evenly around the circle, warily. They're close enough as is to the coal. Thanks, she said. If they're too far and the spell fails, then the spell fails. Trixie sighed. Fine, she conceded, looking over the book again. Dust? Trixie hefted a bag of dust with her telekinesis, levitating it over Lyra's head. The musician let out a noise sigh as Trixie emptied it over her. Sprinkle of pure water. Trixie hefted a bowl and used her telekinesis again to splash water across Lyra's body, circling her as it did. And the last magic words. That's a really weird concept, by the way, Lyra said. I mean, I know that sounds weird coming from me, but words can't hold magic on their own. They're mnemonics. When I do my spells through song, I really just use them to help me focus, and the words themselves don't really matter. Well, they matter to zebras, Trixie said as she finished circling Lyra, looking her in the eye. Okay, here goes. Trixie closed her eyes, focusing, as Lyra readied herself as well. Both their horns glowed slightly. According to the spellbook, this was the most important part. It wasn't enough to simply say the words. You had to believe in them. Nini ala miku ni abusushi miku mimi krieta makana na tatutu miko joy to wewe. Trixie's eyes were closed, so she didn't properly notice the lights in the house dimming, but Lyra did. Her eyes widened as she channeled more magic into her horn. There was simply something arcane happening here. As she focused, to her eyes, she could see the magic taking shape around her. Strangely, despite Trixie's chanting in zebra, the magic didn't seem to be coming from her at all, but rather the paint on her body was just glowing blue now. In the circle of coal dust, glowing green, and the candles, each of which took on a red aurora. The auroras seemed to reach out and collide around each other and around Lyra. Lyra was more than enough adult to admit she was wrong. Apparently the magic words did have power, and she had to admit zebra magic seemed to have power to spare. It was as though the spell, rather than talking or even touching Trixie's own magic, was being pulled from the very air itself and shaped by the words Trixie was speaking. Wewe ni binamu, kuate abo kwa mikue miriwe. Wewe ni membamu, kuisia kwa mikino miriwe. She remembered after a moment she was supposed to be observing and learning. Focusing, she tried to identify what the magic was actually doing. Definitely transmutation, Lyra observed. Despite the alien source, zebra magic was definitely working on familiar lines as it moved across her body. But with elements of conjuration? Is this spell for 2 skulls? Is that possible? Lyra never heard of a spell somehow being part of 2 schools at the same time. As Lyra understood magic, it was fairly rigid. Everything could be grouped into the 8 schools of magic. Then again, she knew that the schools of magic were, ultimately, created for convenience's sake. and had little to do with magic itself. Instead, having been named and organized by unicorn wizards long ago. It wasn't impossible there for to be magic that Lyra didn't recognize as being part of one of 8 schools, but it was certainly a jarring experience. 喂喂你便当木，你可睡呀可你哇西，喂喂你便当木，没啥木哇可me feel. Lyra wasn't certain she could observe much more. Magic positively flooded the air around her now, hurting her eyes and horn to look at. She learned just about all she could anyway, and so settled back, turning off her horn as it were, and waiting. The spell would take effect in just a few minutes. She'd get to see what it was like as a zebra. She didn't imagine it would be too different. 喂喂你便当木，喂喂你便当木，喂喂你便当木. Lyra convulsed at the last word. She had a very distinct sense that whatever was happening should have been immensely painful. But thankfully, it wasn't. But that didn't change the fact that all the magic in the room suddenly seemed to collapse into her, as though she had become a sinkhole for it. It began to shake her body around like a rag doll. That was then the first secondly wet crack split through the air. Lyra had just enough time to wonder if her neck had been snapped. Suddenly, everything went black. Hearing was the first thing to return. As Lyra slowly opened her eyes, found herself looking at Trixie. Her fellow unicorn was frowning, glancing over at her book, then back to Lyra, her horn glowing. That's not right, Trixie mumbled. Lyra blinked, as she slowly climbed onto her hooves. What? She asked, looking down. Her hooves were the same, her coat the same mint green as it was supposed to be. Oh, right, she said, touching a hoof to her snout, then feeling her horn. She wasn't supposed to be green. She was supposed to be a black and white striped zebra. Or white and black, depending on how you look at it. All that magic, and I'm still a unicorn? Trixie glanced back to Lyra. Not exactly, she said, pointing behind Lyra. Lyra blinked a few times, suddenly freezing in place. What was she going to find when she looked back there? Was she going to find her hindquarters transformed? A fishtail? Tentacles? Was her cutie mark going to be missing? Would that mean she had no special talent? Slowly, achingly, Lyra looked behind her and saw, in addition to her perfectly normal hindquarters and cutie mark, was a brand new set of mint green feathery wings. Lyra frowned, and her wings moved of their own accord, drooping a little. This startled her, and her wings responded remotely like that of any Pegasus, flaring up. And the sudden movement startled her more. Then the wings started beating off of their own accord, taking her up, her wings apparently unaware of the fact that she was in a kitchen rather than a low ceiling. Smack! Thud! Ow! Lyra said as she picked herself off the ground. Trixie observed her for a few moments, then looked back to her book. See, this is why I hate casting from a book, she said. I don't know. I said the magic words right, I'm pretty sure. All the ingredients are right. She looked at Lyra. By the way, those things didn't magically appear from nowhere. They grew out of you, and they didn't have feathers at first. It was gross. Lyra didn't pay Trixie any mind, as she extended and retracted her wings a few times, stretching them, examining the feathers, the way they moved and bended. It wasn't every day that some pony got a new set of appendices after all. The sensation was strange, especially given how easily it came to her. Moving her wings was as simple as moving her legs or neck. This is actually pretty cool, she said, and set her horn aglow as she cast one of the simplest cantrips, a spell that let a unicorn see magic. Hang on, I wonder what their magic looks like. Ah! Lyra recoiled, wings beating, as her eyes were suddenly assaulted by bright golden light, emanating not just from her wings, but her. She bit her wings in a panic a few times, taking to the air, slamming into a wall, before finally thinking to dismiss her magic sight cantrip. Trixie was at Lyra's side in an instant, leaning over her fallen friend. What's wrong? Are you okay? She asked, putting aloof on Lyra's withers. Yeah, I'm fine, just... Ow! Don't look at my aura right now. It's bright. Trixie frowned. Hang on, she said, stepping back from Lyra and setting her horn to glow. I'm used to seeing really powerful auras. Princess Luna taught me how to basically put some magic sunglasses on. Trixie's eyes flashed blue as she looked at Lyra for a moment. Her frown deepened. That's odd. What? First, those wings aren't magical. They're actually a part of you now. I think they're permanent. Well, Princess Luna might be able to get rid of them. Or we could grab a saw and saw them. Otherwise, they're not coming off. Lyra considered, looking to her wings, stretching and unstretching them a few times. She had them for 5 minutes, and already they made her smack into a wall, twice. Well, that was because she wasn't used to them yet. All things considered, there were worse things to be trapped than a winged unicorn. She could have been turned into some kind of naked bear or something. Well, if they start to be a problem, we'll go to Luna, she said, standing up, stretching her wings. But I kind of like them. She looked at Trixie. Was there something else? Yeah, have you always been this bright? What do you mean? Well, like I said, the wings are actually part of you, which means they shouldn't be giving off any real magic aura in and of themselves. So what I'm looking at is you, right now. Your basic magical potential. It's huge. Lyra considered the fast golden light that nearly blinded her when she looked at herself. No, that's not normal, she said. I think my teachers at the academy said I had a little more magic than was typical, but not much. Trixie frowned and opened her eyes to say something. Then there was a midnight blue flash in the room. Both mares yelped in terror. Lyra's wings began beating of their own accord. When suddenly the two found themselves no longer in Trixie's home. Instead, they were floating in the vast reaches of the cosmos. There were stars everywhere, every brightness a hue. Above them floated the crystalline surface of the moon, bright and full, but otherwise there was nothing but them and the endless expanse of the universe. I have to admit, Trixie, a familiar voice said, emanating from the room, that this has come far sooner than I thought it would. But that does not make it any less of a momentous occasion. I even have a song prepared for it. You have come such a long way to Princess Luna, and I've watched you from that very first... Miss Heartstrings? Luna asked, as the two unicorns got a distinct sense the moon frowned. Lyra looked to the moon. She was supposed that this was where the voice was emanating from, and so it was probably the right thing to look at. She bowed as best as she could, floating in zero gravity as she was. Yes? She asked. Princess, what's going on? Trixie asked. The sense that the moon was frowning deepened. It flashed, and Luna was suddenly before them, standing tall and wrinkled despite the lack of gravity. As she looked at Trixie, then Lyra, seemed confused. Miss Heartstrings, why are you an alicorn? Lyra blinked at the question. I'm not. Your wings would suggest otherwise. Trixie raised a hoof. That be me. The Deceiver spellbook you sent me. I think a spell or two in it was mislabeled. It gave Lyra wings. I think they're permanent, but Lyra seems to like them. Luna considered Trixie for a moment, then looked back to Lyra, her frown and look of confusion ever growing. No, she said at length, though I see the confusion. Trixie, but no, that's not what happened. Luna sat down, heedless of zero gravity. Trixie and Lyra decided to do likewise, as Luna looked between the two of them. All right, Trixie. I'm afraid I have a confession to make. I did not merely take you on as my apprentice all those years ago, simply because I saw your potential and special talent to do good for Equestria. Although that was large part of my motivation, and I want to make it clear that nothing has changed between us. But in addition to my hope that you might become a force for good in Equestria, I also saw a spark inside of you. A spark? More like a seed, actually, Luna said. A seed that, if properly nurtured and tended to, would one day blossom. Within you, I saw an incessant godling, the possibility that you could become an alicorn, like myself. Trixie blinked. What? She asked, then looked at Lyra, her eyes widened. What? Oh no. Oh no. I think I see where this is going. Luna grimaced, looking to Lyra. I don't know how, she said, but I think that somehow the Deceiver magic has removed the seed from Trixie. and into you, Miss Heartstrings. And then somehow it sprouted, and, well, now you're an alicorn. Give it back! Trixie exclaimed, standing in zero gravity. I wanna be an alicorn! Lyra blinked, looking to Trixie, then to herself. Okay, she said, standing. I don't really want to be an alicorn, Your Majesty. Besides, this is Trixie's destiny. Luna tapped her front hose together. See, the thing is, she said, looking embarrassed. I wasn't even aware that the seed could be moved, and now that it has, and now that you are an alicorn, Miss Heartstrings, I doubt that it could very much be moved again. Trixie glared at Lyra, while Lyra looked at Trixie, shrugged helplessly. I didn't know! I'm sorry. Trixie held her glare for a few moments, before wilting. Okay, she moaned. Fine, you didn't know. Princess, I guess you didn't know. It's just, I didn't even know about this plan of yours. I felt a long-term effort at molding you into a better pony was a wiser course of action than simply letting you know from the beginning. Luna said, almost apologetically. Trixie threw her head back and wailed, I wanted to be a god! Trixie stopped in place, turning in circles, muttering and ranting to herself. As Luna stood, trotted over to Lyra, heels in the lack of the ground to trot on. Give her time, the princess said. I'm certain she will come to accept this. Her? Lyra asked. What about me? I don't want to be an alicorn. I don't want to have to move the moon and stars around. Well, they are mine, so you won't have to, Luna said. There was a slight pause as she reached out a hoof, poking Lyra as her face took an almost petulant child's look. Seriously, though, mine. I'll let you move the sun on occasion, though, if you want. But the moon, stars, mine. Lyra blinked. In an instant, Luna's serene, regal look was back. I tend to the heavens in any event, Luna said. I'm not certain what your responsibility will be, though. I suspect strongly that it will relate to your special talent. But I don't want responsibility! That's why I'm a musician! Luna frowned. That's not stereotypical at all, she muttered. Miss Heartstrings, I understand that this is a very big, unexpected change. I don't expect you to give up everything immediately. In fact, I think these things will happen simply naturally. That's what happened to Princess Cadenza and Cavida. She bowed her head. Simply live your life as you might otherwise. Nothing has changed yet. Except I can banish people into the stars if they annoy me. Don't do that. It's taken me 40 millennia to get this nice guy just so. Luna inclined her head. If you need to talk with me about anything, simply look to the sky and speak, and I'll hear. And I'll be around to run damage control if you do anything that you shouldn't, like release the Smooze, Tyrak, Lavon, Grogar, or Erebus. What about Katrina? What about Katrina? Luna returned Trixie and Lyra to the earth, specifically just outside Trixie's home. Trixie eyed Lyra for some time after she did. Your horn is still short. Lyra looked up at her horn. It wasn't short. She refused to believe it was short. But Trixie was in a mood right now, and Lyra supposed she could understand it. It couldn't have been easy to deal with, leading in less than a minute that you were going to be a god, but then accidentally transferred that potential to one of your best friends. Yeah, there's that, Lyra conceded. I'm sorry, Trixie. Trixie sighed. It's all right, she admitted after several long moments. I'm happy for you, I guess. And also insanely jealous. Insanely jealous. But I guess I can't miss what I never knew I had. Maybe. Lyra nodded. After a moment, she leaned in, giving Trixie a friendly smuzzle. Still friends? Yeah, Trixie confirmed, returning the nuzzle. Still friends. Several months later, Lyra dodged yet another blast of the alicorn reclamation crystal that Trixie had constructed and enchanted over the past several months. This is not how friends treat other friends, Trixie! She cried out. It is when friends steal stuff from their friends! Trixie cried out as she chased after Lyra on her magic carpet. I want to be an alicorn! The previous part of this chapter, of this live read, was purely fictional. This is not canon. This was just something created for a contest. We apologize for adding this part to the story and want to let you know with a heavy heart that those responsible have not only been flogged, but their families have been flogged and their puppies have been flogged. Thank you, and please enjoy the rest of the fic as it continues naturally with Lyra being a human. P.S. If you can find a cute picture of Lyra as an alicorn, I will give you 50 hugs. See you next chapter.